V novi dobi avtomobilizma, ko imamo v avtomobilih veliko elektronskih pomagal in s prihajajočimi avtonomnimi vozili, se bodo naši možgani med vožnjo obnašali drugače, kot so se recimo še nekaj desetletij nazaj. No, Nikolaos Dimitriadis je eden tistih, ki nevrologijo lepo vpeljuje tudi v vsakodnevno poslovno življenje oziroma v naše obnašanje. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with us as drivers working our brain, and how much are we losing that in the future?
First of all, it's amazing that we have such a brain that allows us to drive so safely or so fast, because I see sometimes the races, and it's amazing that this brain is capable of all this technique and skill.
Is it more the left or the right side?
I think that concerning our skills of driving, a big part is played by the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the small brain we have in the back, and it is responsible for getting the stimuli from the external world and turning it into action. Very fast action, very fast reaction in order to deal with what happens in front of us. Actually, if you think about it, what makes you an expert driver is driving automatically but fantastically. If you start thinking about it, you decrease the ability to react fast. So it's all automatic, of course, based on how your brain learned to have this skill.
What will happen to our brains, our learning abilities, when we stop driving, where the autonomous phase is so, well, it is here, but when it is implemented in our cars and we just go into the car and the car drives itself, the car knows exactly via our calendar where it should go, and we're not thinking anymore about it.
Well, there is the romantic view that says that every new technology that appears, the main purpose is to give us more free time. So imagine if you don't have to drive at work, so to be constantly focused and responding to the challenges of the road, then you will have more free time to do what? Enjoy it, listen to music, work more. So the romantic view of technology was always more technology, more time for us. But if you look at history, this never happened. Actually, we work now more than any other time in human history when we had much less technology. So this is a romantic and I would say not accurate view that all of a sudden if I'm free from driving, I will give this time to some wonderful things. There is this law that says that the work always expands to occupy the available time. Now, it's also something very interesting that I usually discuss with my friends in the US. Now, you know that in the US, most people drive automatic. You know, the stick is almost non-existent. And one of my friends moved to the US. After some years, he posted on Facebook a picture of the stick and say, hey, does anybody remember how to drive with this thing? So whatever is automatic, we lose gradually the ability to use it.
We don't work our brain anymore.
Correct.
Is it the autonomous driving? The cars that will be driving us to work or to school, and we will be texting, reading, or doing whatever we want
preparing
in between.
Meetings and presentations.
Is it just a PR marketing catch from automotive industry? Because we know autonomous driving from well over 100 years now.
Oh.
We have autobus,
yes.
We have trains,
right.
We have taxi as well. But
right.
You need something else to convince the people that it is okay that you go
right.
into the car
right.
and you don't have to drive.
Right.
Is it a scam or?
Well, the technological progress is real, so I don't want to take anything away from the amazing scientific achievements that actually lead us to this self-driving car. So bravo for the technology that actually, and the people that worked on that, and the companies, so amazing work. But on the other hand, you talked about two hemispheres in the brain. Most of what people believe about the two hemispheres is wrong. Both hemispheres have emotions, both hemispheres work with language. So it's not like we thought before, one is artistic part, the other is mathematical. This is not so much true, but what is true about the two hemispheres is that they understand the world different. And it is the left hemisphere that is very excited for novelty, for new things that maybe long-termly did not prove to be such a change, but it's exciting and new and creates more dopamine in the brain from the anticipation of the new thing. So I think generally the marketing and the PR industry works very well with dopamine and anticipation. So there is some of this there that might be proven correct or not correct.
What are the main issues that come with autonomous driving?
Well, for me, one of the most important issues generally with AI and machines adopting human behavior is the issue of agency. Being an agent means you have the will to decide and to change your behavior. Okay, human beings, we have evolved the ability to decide and to choose to go that way, or work with that person or this person, or do action A through many millions of years of evolution, as well as through learning cultural norms, etc., things that happen to us, experiences. And everything that we do as humans, every single millisecond, there is an intention. Some of this intention we know, some is completely subconscious, most of it actually subconscious. And we have developed even ways through evolution to detect each other's intention, so for me to respond appropriately to your intention. You know, are you with me or with that? Are you in my tribe or not? What about AI? What about autonomous cars? What is going to be their decision-making process? What kind of agency, responsibility for taking very, very important life-saving or life-threatening decisions? And if we program the car to take these decisions, and the action is proven wrong, because all AI is probabilistic. It works on the probability that something will happen. It's never 100%. Who is going to be held accountable? Now, the example that we discussed in the conference today was this of the algorithm in the car of if the car is to hit a wall or hit kids, is the algorithm going to decide to hit the kids and thus to save the driver, or hit the wall and then endanger the driver? And there are some, people from the car industry that say, we make cars, we care about the driver, we sell cars, so my main responsibility is to save the life of the driver. But if this happens and the car hits the kids, and then there is investigation and the kids could be saved, who is going to jail? The driver? The car? The engineers that created the algorithm? So these are very important issues, because AI goes beyond of machines just operating some mechanical actions. Very soon machines will be taking these very important decisions as humans. And for me, this is the biggest problem of AI. What is the intention of the machine? And who is going to decide what is the intention of the machine? And
the calculation of morals, of the justice system that comes with this, and the choice that...
we don't even know how we do it. Of course, we have neuroscience now that it has developed unbelievably the last 20 years because of technology. We can see the brain, but there are so many unknowns. So if we don't know how we make these decisions, how are we going to? So maybe we are going ahead of ourselves, but fortunately or unfortunately, humankind, when it could do something, it does it, regardless if it is good or bad.
What can the car industry do in the segment of the cars all being without the wheel? Mm-hmm. And all the cars will slowly just lose, whatever they have now.
Yes.
They have some moist.
Yes.
You buy a brand because you feel like you are a part of the brand.
Right.
If you don't just buy a car to go from A to B.
Right.
And how will they distinguish one from another?
Of course, time will show, but I think that always there was an option, and there will be an option. It will not be either or. Maybe you are driving in a self-driving mode when you want to go to work and you want to prepare yourself for work, but then maybe driving yourself will become like a sport, like a hobby. It is a sport already, but even for normal people, maybe there will be designed clubs and areas where you will go and experience this sport, or maybe even you will have the ability to drive yourself, or as now is actually happening. So I think there will be options. I don't think the one will kill the other. It will be both possible. But for me, what you asked in the beginning is very important. Some people will be afraid of this change. going into a car and not seeing a driver. And again, it has to do with intentionality. What is the intentionality of the car? And what is the responsibility of the car? This is very normal, very human. But I think the car industry will have to use the latest knowledge we have from studying the brain for creating persuasive and campaigns of influence. Because unfortunately, many times in our communication, we don't take into account how the brain likes to receive information. So when the car industry in general will come out to convince people that this is the right way, and they have the data that it is safer, maybe it's more economic because you save fuel, you should not do it in an academic, scientific way. Here is the data. We have to do very detailed neuromarketing studies to see which parts of the brain react how to these messages, and then to design the message in a brain-friendly way. And I think this will shorten the time of acceptance.
This is the partly answer to my question that comes. How will we introduce this new level of mobility to the aging world population, where a lot of the people won't even put their own cars wheels in someone else's hand, will not drive on the passenger seat, and now they will be faced with the solution that they will not be driving at all. You know? Just trusting the machines.
Yes, this is a very valid concern. But what we know now about the brain is that it changes throughout your life. Before, in neuroscience and psychology, they believed that the brain stops developing at one specific age, and then it was just degenerating until you die. Now we know that new neurons are born every day till you die, around 2,000 new neurons. So we have neurogenesis. Also we have neuroplasticity. Even in very old age, there is new connections that you can create, so new habits that you can adapt. Again, I will go back to my previous answer. The more we understand the brain, the more we will create the right approach for the older population, that they can accept it better. Unfortunately, we forget the older population. We usually design things either for the main active age or for the younger. So again, brain-friendly, brain-based approach is the one that will do extensive testing with the older population to again decrease the time of acceptance, and it's possible.
So if you'd say in percentage, how much of these automotive researches are made for the customers or for the business part?
Right.
What would be your answer?
Well,
do they think about, okay, how safe are the roads going to be and how safe are the people in the mobility as well? Or how much money can we make out of this?
Well, maybe they are not mutually exclusive. I think the revolution of social media and the online world increased transparency. It was not like 20, 30 years ago, 40, that you could have this only profit-oriented mentality and get away with it because nobody will know. Now with social media and with information so fast traveling, I think corporations cannot afford having a different mentality inside and presenting a different mentality outside. So authenticity of what you are as a brand has to be both outside of the company and inside the company. And I think many car companies have understood this and they're going towards the right direction. However, I have to also say that not everybody and not always they have adopted the new amazing ways we have with neurotechnology to make sure that we approach the brain in the right way. There are cases here and there, but we have a lot of work still to do. And I'm very proud that as an applied neuroscientist and as an entrepreneur, we help companies to do exactly that. And
the researchers are necessary with the learning behavior for machines.
Exactly, constant research. And you know, it's happening. It's already happening in the auto industry, where car manufacturers are either experimenting or they have even inserted biometric data within driving. So sensors in the car seat or even on the steering wheel, where it measures your stress levels based on how you sweat, or your heart rate and pulse, so to see if you're becoming tired or sleepy or agitated, you know, angry when you drive. And then they fit all this data, maybe even, I would argue, emotional facial analysis to see exactly if you are angry or tired, etc. With a small HD camera, it's possible. And then how to feed all this information to you as somebody that controls the car, and how you can learn out of this data to improve your driving later on. So there are definitely, I've seen this happening already, but I think that we are just in the beginning. That the more we understand the brain, the more we understand how urgent it is to take it seriously into account whenever we do something for people.
And no more spray and pray technique.
Fantastic, yes. No more spray and pray. Spray and pray was the traditional marketing, communications, and advertising technique. You know, you spray your message and then you pray that somebody will buy. No, now with applied neuroscience, with neuromarketing, consumer neuroscience, we can be much more targeted, and we can really present information in a way that the brain can accept it. You know how much money can we save? There is huge waste of advertising money. You know, we just shout out there and nobody is listening. Very few will listen. So there is a big economic value to finally create communication that will be noticed. I'm not saying that you will buy. We cannot manipulate the brain. But at least we will present it in a way that it wants to receive it.
Nicholas, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.